In this video, we're going to take a look at rotating your game objects. Now, in the last video, we talked about moving, and really, this is a lot of the same concepts are going to come through and be the same as they were in the Move tool video. It's just now they're applied to rotation. So we're going to be using the Rotate tool. This can be accessed by clicking on the Rotate tool button in the upper left-hand corner of your interface in the toolbar, or you can tap the E key to access it. So here's W for the Move tool, E for the Rotate tool. Now, it's the gizmo itself is actually pretty basic. It is color-coded with 3 orthogonal axes so that you can rotate around each one of those axes. So we have red, if we rotate around so you can see red. I realize the fire kind of gets in the way, but we have a red axis to rotate around X. We have a green axis to rotate around Y. We have a blue axis to rotate around Z. And we have this kind of outer ring. And what this allows you to do is to rotate the object in screen space. So it's kind of rotating it around an axis that is always parallel to the view plane. So those are the ways in which you can rotate your object. You can also click kind of in the middle of this on none of the axes and do sort of a free rotation. Though doing this can start to get really unpredictable results after, playing with it for a moment, as you can see here. So be really careful when doing that. But I mean, if you know that you need kind of an organic rotation without a lot of precision, something that feels kind of natural, it is nice to be able to just grab this and go and add some rotation like so. So that's a quick look at the Rotate tool. Now, just like with the Move tool, we have control over the pivot and whether we're going to handle our rotation in a local or a global coordinate space. Excuse me, my brain kind of froze up for just a minute there. So right now we're looking at the pivot of this object. Now because of the way this particular little bench was created in Maya, its pivot point is located in the middle of the fire. If that is inconvenient for us, like if we're trying to rotate around and we don't like the way it's swiveling around the fire, we just want to spin it around on its own, we can click on the pivot button and now we are switching over to the center. So now we're rotating from the center of the object. So now we could just rotate around the y-axis and spin the bench around right there where it sits. We can also switch over to local and global modes for our rotation. Now currently I've switched this over to global, and if you take a look, these 3 rotational axes are coinciding with the axes of our scene gizmo, where X is pointing kind of off to our left, and the red ring allows us to rotate around that axis. So the flat side of that ring is pointing down that axis. If you're unfamiliar with that, that's kind of how that works. Now notice though, as I rotate around, the rotation gizmo is updating. So if you've been playing for a while, now we deselect, reselect again, check it out. It has reset, and now it once again points down the global axes. So while you're using it, it will spin around, but if you deselect and come back to it, it will reset itself so that the gizmo corresponds once again with the global rotation axes.
Right. While you're actually rotating, it's just giving you a visual representation on how far you've actually rotated that object since you started rotating it.
That's right. Now if we switch back over to local, then the rotation gizmo will always orient itself along with the local rotation axis of the object itself. So this particular bench's z-axis points along its short dimension, and its x-axis points along its long dimension, and then y points up and down, and no matter how we rotate this, the rotation gizmo is always going to reflect that. So very handy if you know that no matter what kind of crazy orientation your bench happens to have, you need to kind of spin it in place. You can switch over to center so that you're not using maybe a distant pivot point. Click over to local mode, and then when you rotate, you can just rotate around its local Y, and now it's going to spin in place like so. So that's a quick look at working with your game objects, specifically in terms of rotation. Once more, you can click on the Rotate tool button in the upper left-hand corner of the Unity interface, or you can tap the E key, and that is going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.